heard about it as well. So quite amazing for an American teenager to learn about how severe it was in Chosin Reservoir. Could you a little bit describe what it was like?
I I know that it was an ambush and it was like really cold out, and so a lot of the soldiers got frostbite and lost fingers and toes and things, and not many of them survived. There's only a couple hundred, and they're outnumbered by thousands, and they only barely made it out because they were going down the hill and the mountain and just got saved by more reinforcements.
Okay. I haven't talked about much I learned from the history classes with my friends when I was at your age, but after learning something about Korean War, have you talked about it with your friends or your relatives or neighbors in your community?
A little bit. Like, I'll talk to my friends a little bit about my grandpa and how he was in the war, and I just tell them a little bit about what he did, and then we talk a little bit about some of the battles and stuff, but it doesn't come up very often.
Mr. Kim, while we're on the subject, I would like to add to this that in the year 2005, I received a letter from a school teacher in Crozet, Virginia, Henley Middle School. Her name is Marcy Klug. A young 7th grader by the name of Max Werner heard about the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir. And I was contacted by our national department, Mr. Larry Keinert, to do a TV show about the Chosin Reservoir, and if I could bring forth some of the survivors of that battle, which, of course, we have here today. And I said yes. So we made a production of it. And we sent it to Crozet, Virginia, and we got a letter back from him, which I have in my briefcase. I don't have it right now. But in the letter, he says that he never knew that such a battle took place in his life. He said after reading the complete history and hearing the events by veterans Quaylar and Bender and Lloyd and Hullinger, who were the veterans who survived that battle, he said that without a doubt in his mind that it'll go down in history as probably one of the greatest battles of all time, and should go along with Bunker Hill, the Alamo, and D-Day, and the crossing of the Delaware by George Washington. So I was very honored to get that, to know that at least our youth have picked up something, and he expressed himself in the letter that he would continue on to tell all Americans about this battle and the bravery and the heroism that was showed that day at the Chosin Reservoir, and he appreciated the fact that we had sent him that DVD. And I thought this would be a good thing to add to the students' provocation here and what we're talking about.
Okay. So probably, you have a visiting teacher as a Korean War veteran. So do you teach Korean War each year, or just
Yes.
recent ones?
Yes, it's a part of my curriculum to teach that, and it happens for us in my school year in the spring, and I know our veterans are coming in April back to my school, so it's usually about that time each year that they come.
Each year, I mean, could I ask since when the veterans come to your school?
Mr. Yanni and I were talking about that, and I think it's been about 6 years. There was one year that they had a special program here, actually, in the library away from campus, and we came to them instead of them coming to us. And so I think we've had this experience. I think this will be our 6th year this year. And I told you, too, that my students always have a class trip to Washington, D.C., but we go in the fall. So they've already been and seen the memorial, and they have lots of questions about it because, they need to understand some things to appreciate the memorial. So I kind of get them started thinking about that as we visit the memorial, and they start thinking about it then, so they have a long time to think about that before we actually meet the veterans and study about the war.
Okay. So, Michael, did you go to the Washington, D.C. and Korean War Memorial as well?
Oh, no, I haven't been to Washington, D.C., but I'd like to go soon so I can see all the monuments and stuff.
And so when your students go to Washington, it's not a compulsory one. They can choose.
It is. Actually, my school, I teach at a small private school, and it's a class trip, so all the students do go. We have about 50 students in the 8th grade, and they all go. So they all have that experience together.
So, what portion of students do some project, their own project about the Korean War?
Well, after the trip to Washington, D.C., it's actually from the English teacher, not me. I'm the history teacher, but the English teacher has them write a paper about the monument or memorial that had the biggest impact on them. And some of the students do write about the Korean War. I know I sent a copy of one of the papers to Mr. Yaney a few years ago because it was just so well written by one of the students about how what kind of impact that it had on him. And I wanted the veterans to see that, to know that it does have an impact, and not just, I appreciate Michael being, so much that it's part of his family history, but a lot of these students don't have that family history. It's not a part of anything that they talk about within their family, and for them to see that and be impacted by it is really important. And I like those kind of projects that are more personal, where they reflect on what they've seen and what they've learned. And they always write letters to the veterans after they visit.
Yes, they do.
And they're always very specific about the things that meant a great deal to them. And I'm always eager to get those off in the mail to you too, so you can see how much the students appreciate your coming to talk to them, but also what they've learned and how that really stays with them. Like I said, far longer than anything they would read in a book.
Michael, do you have some friends whose parents or grandparents are veterans?
I have one friend that I know his grandparents were in the Korean War, but he's the only friend I know of that talks about it.
Okay, of course, at your age, I never talked about or fighting with some other country, but okay. So, your experience, probably as you grew up, you learned something about your grandparents' experience. So, do you recall any thing you learned when you were very young?
Yeah, I remember my grandpa telling me a story about he was in a convoy and he got ambushed, and he was in the back of a truck, and they got ambushed, and then the truck sped off to try to get away, and he fell out of the back and got shot twice in the leg. And he was telling me that story, and then how they got away because he survived it. But I remember him telling me that story, and then telling me various stories about the Chosin Reservoir and just him going down there and like what it was like down in South Korea.
Right.
Mr. Kim,
But yes,
Yes, go ahead.
this is supposed to be televised, but I'm going to ask after.
That's all right, because everything is going to be edited when we're all done.
All right. And actually, I don't expect the young generations talk about our grandparents' experience engaged in a foreign country. I did not. I mean, and my children does not at all. Do not at all. So when you learn something about the Korean War, and at age 16 or 17, I didn't care by myself. I didn't care much about what I learned from my history textbook. But so I want to ask, when you do some research, and how much hour did you put on? And because you answered me already, but you didn't put much of numbers and names and places. So would you give me would you elaborate on that about your project?
What do you mean? Like,
what book did you read as a reference, or how many hours did you put into your project? And personally, you don't have to answer what grade did you get, stuff like that.
The paper I wrote, I didn't spend that much time because I knew a lot of it from my grandpa, and I just talked to him a little bit about it, and I just, like, some of the books, I used the history book for maybe a little bit of it, but there wasn't that much in there, so I used
When
the
you say
internet.
history, it's a textbook, or?
Yeah.
Okay, textbook.
Like, just a little bit, like, for the cities and stuff. And then I used the internet for some, like, just some random war sites on there. And then my grandpa helped me with a lot of it, just telling me about some of the stuff that went on.
So what, do you recall the title of your project?
I think it was just called the South Korean War. I just called it that. And then my grade was probably a B.
You don't have to do this one. So how long was the, how many pages was it?
It was, I had a page and then a half of another page on it. So it was just one front page and then a half of another page.
Was it a final like final term project, or
No, it was
just homework?
It was kind of like homework, but it was a project just in the middle of the trimester. So it wasn't final, but it was still a good project.
Have you seen a movie that is related to Korea or Korean War in anyhow? Or any Korean actors in it?
I've seen one movie. I don't remember the name, but I watched it. It was a few years back when it came out, which it wasn't really big, but it was just about the Korean War, so I thought it looked interesting and watched it. And it was, yeah, pretty good. And just told, it didn't really go into great detail about this stuff, but it kind of told most of the story just about the war.
Okay, so when you invite over the veterans as a teacher, did you also invite the veterans from Vietnam War or World War II?
Part of Mr. Yaney's group, you'll be meeting him in a few minutes, is a World War II veteran too, and the students always enjoy hearing from him. I've not yet had Vietnam veterans. I think in our country, the Vietnam veterans have a harder time telling their story. It's a much different experience for them, and I mean I can't speak to it because I haven't interviewed them or spent as much time with them, but I think traditionally it's seen as a much more difficult war to talk about because it was fought in a different way, and their experience coming home was even harder. I think that, I mean, the Korean War veterans, I think, were overlooked, but some of the Vietnam veterans were treated very poorly when they came home, and so we don't hear as much from them. I don't think they have a program. If they have a program established to talk to students, I don't know about it. And I wouldn't have known about the Korean veterans had the Tell America program not been established where they reached out to the schools. It's hard for a teacher to know unless we know someone personally. It's hard for us to know who to invite, who feels comfortable telling their story in front of the students. And I think because these gentlemen tell their stories so often that they know what to say, and they know how to relate it to students, because my students are younger than Michael. They're 13 or 14 years old. And they know exactly the kinds of things to say that they understand and can relate to in a particular way.
I would like to add a comment to that also, Mr. Kim. If we look at all the conflicts that we've had in the 20th century, very little do we know about any of the combative activities of the wars. World War II, we know about Iwo Jima and Okinawa, these famous places. But this is the reason why the Tell America program was conducted. And it wasn't until back in 2005 when I sat down with these combative veterans. We're talking about people who have been wounded, POWs, they're all here today. And we had a discussion about we've got to open up, and if we don't, the youngest generation will never know. So it took a lot of courage for these men to come forward. And now they're quite indoctrinated in what they do. And what makes it so easy is, and so honorable for us, is that I can take these combat veterans to a school, and in every sense of the word, they'll remain a hero in the eyes of the young people that they meet. And they'll be able to tell their stories of the Cold War that we fought so long ago in detail.
But that's quite unlike what I expected, because Koreans, they believe that Korean War was sandwiched by the World War II and Vietnamese War.
But keep in mind too, Korea was in the domination of Japanese for 38 years, where they were unable to talk their language, and they were slaves in their own country until World War II came along and freed that island.
Yeah, right. And also, we believe that the leaders at the Vietnam War, they became the very influential and powerful position at this moment. So senators and even the presidential candidates. So